If the tumultuous regulatory environment of 2018 taught industry stakeholders and consumers of risk-reduced tobacco products anything, it's that opponents to vaping are well-funded, well-coordinated, and relentless. But just how far down the conspiracy rabbit hole could one go when contemplating the machinations of public health agencies, anti-smoking advocacy groups, academia, and the media? Are they really working together in an orchestrated attempt to kill vaping? Joining us today is quite possibly the only person in the world who could answer that question, Michelle Minton, Senior Fellow at the Competitive Enterprise Institute in Washington, D.C. She is the author of the spanking brand new report, Fear Profiteers: How E-Cigarette Panic Benefits Health Activists. Michelle, thanks for joining us today on RegWatch.
Thanks for having me on. I love your show.
So first off, let me ask you this question. Is there a conspiracy against vaping?
Well, I mean, a conspiracy is it's a plot among a bunch of people to do something harmful. So yes, I'd say there is. It's not as coordinated as, an assassination attempt or anything, but there are hundreds, thousands of people who are working and being paid to basically kill the e-cigarette industry, which will basically kill a lot of adult smokers.
Now, the report, give us some background about it. How did it get started? Why was it done?
Well, like most of my enormous research projects, usually starts with a very simple question, at least what I think should be a simple question. And I started noticing all these media stories about Juul and adolescence, and I started wondering, where is this coming from? Because the research data wasn't showing an epidemic. It was showing a very small percentage of teenagers experimenting with e-cigarettes, but it didn't, in my mind, it nowhere near rose to the level of the panic that I was seeing in newspapers, on blogs, etc. So I started asking, where is this coming from? And as I did my research, as I started talking to health departments and looking at what the FDA and CDC were doing and academics, I noticed a lot of similarities in their language. I noticed that the efforts appeared very coordinated. And as I dug in, I realized that it is coordinated, that they are working together, constantly talking about their strategy and what they're going to say and how they're going to do it. And if you really think about it, it's intuitive why they are working together for this, because everybody profits when there is an enormous panic about something related to health.
So, Michelle, you write in Fear Profiteers that a vast network of groups are seemingly independent, operating independent from one another, yet are in fact deeply financially interwoven. So who are these groups and how wide is the network, and how does this network operate against vaping?
Right, so most people don't realize that in the US, the National Institutes of Health are all a bunch of separate institutes, and they all have to compete, like the NIH itself has to compete, for a piece of the budget. So they go to Congress and they say, this is why we need the budget. So the better case they can make that something is a huge threat, the more money they can get. So that's NIH. But what people also don't realize is that public health departments in each state and county, a lot of their money comes from grants from NIH. And the same is true for a lot of the public health organizations, the private public health organizations like Tobacco Free Kids, Truth Campaign, a lot of those. They get their money from both the federal government sometimes and from local public health departments, which contract them, literally they call them contractors, to carry out government business. And contractors like Tobacco Free Kids or Truth can do things that government agencies can't do, including lobby. So these groups then lobby the federal government and say, hey, we think the National Institute of Cancer should get some more money because of this huge problem. And then the National Cancer Institute hands some of that money over to these groups. So it's a nice little circle that they're all working together to sustain their campaigns.
Fill us in on an annual basis just how much money is being spent to fight against, obviously, tobacco, but really today it's vaping.
I mean, it's billions. I couldn't give you an exact number because a lot of the numbers just aren't available. But you have groups like the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Everybody loves Robert Wood Johnson. That's the philanthropic arm of Johnson & Johnson, which makes lots of things, including nicotine patches and nicotine drugs. And they fund, with hundreds of millions of dollars every year, they fund universities, individual researchers. They fund the American Cancer Society, which itself then funds a bunch of other groups, and together they coordinate their efforts on e-cigarettes. And that's just Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Then you have a group like the Truth Campaign, which was initially founded back in the 1990s, early 2000s with the Master Settlement Agreement against tobacco companies. And they got $1 billion. And wisely, what they did was they pretty much just put it into a market account, and they just generate, I think, $60 million every year off of that. So they don't really need to fundraise. Then you have Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, which itself was initially founded and funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, again. And then on the other side, you have, like I said, these national health departments, so government departments funded with federal government dollars, like National Health Institute, et cetera. They send out grant money to a lot of these same people to do research, and they also send out grant money to local health departments to keep people off of e-cigarettes and tobacco. And then those local health departments turn around and grant that money to other groups, including many that we just discussed. So there is a synergy between all of these groups with federal money and private donations.
Our Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids talking with people at Truth Initiative. So let's say the communications and marketing team at Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, communications and marketing team at Truth Initiative. Are they talking and coordinating calendars? Yes.
100%. People from Truth, Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, academics, health departments, federal government agencies, they are all in constant communication with each other on this issue, coordinating efforts, holding webinars, coming up with copy to send around. That part is coordinated, yes. I think the most disturbing aspect of the research that I did was the coordination aspect where you have the FDA citing Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, Truth, and researchers or the NIH citing these studies that they have funded, and then news media reports, there's a new study, CDC says this, and they are citing all of these people. And it appears as it's a groundswell of independent groups that are saying the same thing. They're saying e-cigarettes are dangerous, they're hooking our kids, they're going to kill our kids. But what it is groups that have been working together for years on the same messaging tactics or very similar messaging tactics. And they're, like I said, it's synergistic. So, FDA gets the help and support of apparently objective scientific organizations or health organizations like the American Cancer Society, and the American Cancer Society gets what it wants. It gets the FDA to take action, and it gets news media to cover all of this, which makes the American Cancer Society or Truth or whatever it is look like they're doing a good job and say, hey, we're effective. We did this stuff and then the government acted on it, so give us more money.
Let me ask you this. Is the federal government and FDA specifically abrogating its responsibility to inform consumers about an important product that is already on the market?
Yes, I would say that they are stepping outside of what their purpose is. Like I said, their purpose is to protect people from adulterated foods and products, so that someone's slipping something bad and there are manufacturers not honestly telling you what's in their product. And also giving people information and then letting them make their own choices. So if the federal government was saying, here's what we know about e-cigarettes, here's what we know about nicotine, you have the information, make your choice. That's not what they're doing right now. What they're doing right now is saying, you have the information and you don't seem to care, so we're gonna just step in here and make it for you, which is way outside of what their role is.
Right, and then they're poisoning the rest of the population's understanding of the product in order to force the vapers to be in a corner.
Yet all of these groups that I'm talking about, from the federal government on down, they're all businesses, basically. They may not have customers, but they're all businesses, and they use the media and they use marketing just like any other company would. So, the FDA is saying horror e-cigarettes because that gives them support among the population, because they're trying to tamp down on people like me and a lot of other groups who are crying foul, saying, you're harming adult smokers' ability to quit something that is very likely going to kill them. So our voices are drowned out by mommy bloggers and people at the New York Times who don't understand science yet still feel the need as a reporter to give their opinion about e-cigarettes. We are completely drowned out by that, and the FDA can just continue on with what it wants to do.
The media, the reporters, the workaday people every day you've talked to, are they showing any love for your report and want to hear the story?
Some are, like you. People who are open-minded, people who are into free markets, some of the conservative outlets, of course, that's not who I wrote the report for. Really, the report was meant for regulators, science-minded people, progressives, because the case I'm trying to make is there might be some long-term harms of e-cigarettes that we don't know. That can always happen. But we would be squandering an enormous opportunity to save millions of lives, many more than that, potentially over the course of several decades, if we let fear drive policy, or fear driven by something else, profit motive. The media, I'm one who naively still believes that reporters should be objective. And I like to think of reporters as objective reporters of the news. But more and more what I'm seeing, especially with this report, is that it's not the case. These groups are oftentimes, maybe this is a whole separate report that I have to write, is that media outlets themselves are financially tied to or otherwise tied to some of the groups that I'm talking about, like Bloomberg. We all know former Mayor Bloomberg, who's a very big progressive, very big on, soda bans, cigarettes, e-cigarettes. There appear to be some financial ties between him and some of these media outlets, which explains to me why. I'm not saying he told them not to cover some stuff, but that it might make them step back and say, we don't need to cover this. So no, I'm not getting any love. And it's a very smart play, honestly, from people who are anti e-cigarettes, to simply not cover a study like mine. Because why give it free publicity?
So you're getting crickets then from the main players?
Yes.
New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, yep. Crickets.
Yep, nothing. And I assure you, our media team at CEI is very diligent. They definitely sent it out to all the people. We gave embargoed copies of the report to everybody. And I won't say the reporter's name, but I did get one back from the New York Times who simply said, I don't agree with this. Paraphrasing, this person said, I don't agree with this, so I'm not interested.
That's astonishing.
Yes.
Because it's not about say the health reporter that covers the health beat at New York Times, is it her job to decide what science to agree with and not, or is it not her job to cover the story?
Yeah, this person said that they didn't believe that government organizations give out false information for profit motives, so they're not interested in the study.
I want to ask you, Michelle, about Bloomberg. You mentioned Michael Bloomberg. Can you confirm whether or not Bloomberg's organization is actively sending out talking points to the media on a regular basis?
I can't confirm that yet, but that's something that I plan to spend a lot of 2019, not only Bloomberg, but it's something I plan to investigate in 2019, is how some of these health nonprofits are financially tied to media, or what ties there are between the media. Because when I wrote this report, my perspective was that the media has its own pressures. Reporters have their own pressures and their own biases, and they're not intentionally misleading the public. They're just pressed for time. They're using press releases or whatever it is, or they believe these groups. But at this point, part of me is starting to believe that it is willful, and I've heard a few things that might make me think there is a command from on high from somebody, Bloomberg or another group, that might be influencing the subjects that are reported on or the people they choose to interview.
Michelle, at some point during all of this, now considering that you have been now researching this area for a while, and it certainly shows in the piece, in your report, did you have an aha moment at some point, and what was it?
I think the aha moment was when I realized that it's larger than this, but when I read that the American Cancer Society, I think it was the Florida Public Health Department, had petitioned the federal government for a big grant for their operations, and listed the American Cancer Society as their contractor to carry it out. And the project would actually be housed at the American Cancer Society building in Florida. And members of ACS would be paid by the Department of Health as employees. That was the aha moment for me when I realized just how connected and interwoven these groups that, pretty much right up until I wrote this paper, I also believed they were completely independent from one another. I thought maybe they submit a grant report or a grant proposal to the federal government, maybe they get some grant money. But otherwise, I thought they were completely disconnected. And as I did my research in that one moment in particular, I realized that they are, and it's not a conspiracy if you're not hiding it, they are they are the same in a lot of ways. They are working together and profiting from each other's activities.
A lot of our viewers right now are high-fiving you while simultaneously banging their heads against the wall.
Why is that?
Because they've been saying it for years.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Yeah, no, I mean, so I know that academic research institutions can appear to be independent. A study comes out from this person saying this, and people say, well, he's a professor, he's a physician, blah, blah, blah. And I say, well, he is highly connected. He is so, this person used to work for a federal government agency or whatever. They are connected. But for some reason in my mind, I just didn't think that the coordination, I figured they were friendly, these organizations with public health departments, federal government. But for example, I literally got one of my FOIA requests included a voicemail message from someone at a public health department, I'm not gonna say which one, calling someone at a different public health department, warning them that I was FOIA requesting, warning that there was a FOIA request in progress. And the person making the call had been told by the CDC to tell other people about this so that they could have phone calls instead of emailing, because the emails would be caught in records and I would be able to see them. And another thing I found out was that they have websites where they all talk to each other. None of those were included in my records requests.
So you mean like the chat websites or something? Is it?
Slack, for example, is a version. It's an inter-organization chat room, basically, where you can talk to each other and leave messages. None of those were included in my FOIA records requests. I got the notification messages, but they only gave me emails pretty much. So they are sophisticated and they know how to hide some of this stuff. So that's why I didn't get a great smoking gun quote, I think. But there clearly is evidence of coordination.
So based on what you're saying, you would be crazy to not think they're coordinating.
There's the evidence plus the incentive. So it would be, I'm happy to be proven wrong. Great. That means the world's a little bit better than I thought it was. But all the evidence seems to point towards coordination.